watercolor painting kit by Michael's Artist Loft brand. So this kit I bought a few months ago. I kind of noticed them in and out at Michael's, but at the time it happened to be on clearance, so I had been eyeing it for a while and I bought it since it was only $5. But normally these kits are $10, and I bought the Sea Creature kit, but there's also different themes as well. So in this kit you're gonna see we get 4 drawings, which look really nice, I think, and then also a watercolor kit as well as the paintbrush. So you do get a lot of the supplies you need for watercolor, so I'm interested to see how everything performs. But let's take a look what's inside exactly. So these are the designs. As you can tell, everything's outlined in a light gray, so I am interested to see how well that blends in with the watercolors. I know usually I sketch out my watercolors with tracing paper, which is also light gray, and that usually gets hidden pretty well, so hopefully the same will apply here. The other thing about this is you can see the paper is quite textured, so that's nice. However, I can tell it's not the texture of cotton watercolor paper, which I would not expect for a $10 kit, but that is always something to think about if you're new to watercolor paper. This wood pulp paper, it is not ideal for watercolor really at all, unless you're doing very flat colors. So if you're ever really struggling with watercolor and feel like you hate it, please, please, please go buy all cotton paper and try it on that. And I think it'll really change your mind about watercolors. And then this, this is the watercolor set. So they hid it quite nicely in the packaging. I guess I was expecting it to be bigger. You can see it compared to my hand here. So it's quite tiny, but when watercolors are in pans like this, it does usually, still mean there's a lot of paint in there, even though it looks tiny. So I think this should be enough for those 4 paintings. And I also like how they give us wells here to mix everything. And I think the color palette is also very nice. You can see here that you have a lot of your basic colors, the primaries and secondaries, and then they throw in some ocean themes. So I think it's going to be really nice to work with. One thing that I'm very intrigued about these is that they do not feel like typical Artist Loft watercolor paints. My guess is many of you are very familiar with this paint set here, which is Artist Loft, or at least when I bought it was $5, but it's their very cheap watercolor set. Obviously you get lots of colors, so it's very appealing. However, it is definitely not as pigmented as, nicer quality student paints. And one way to tell that is usually consistency. These feel very chalky. However, this kit here, it feels kind of like plastic, which is usually what, nice watercolors feel like. And you can tell by like the shininess. So I do not think these 2 paints are actually the same, even though they're both by Artist Loft. So I am very interested to try these out and see what they look like. And then lastly, we have this brush here. Just a typical nice round brush. I think it'll work well. The only thing I guess I'd be a little nervous about is it is quite small. So for some of those that have those big washes in the background, I don't know how well this is going to work, especially on wood pulp paper because it dries quite quickly. But anyways, I will get started with swatching these. The back of the package does have some notes here. So one of the first ones is recommending swatching your colors, which is what I normally do with any watercolor set I get. So that's what we will do first. So these are what all the colors look like. I was quite surprised. It's definitely a very, very vibrant color palette once you swatch it out. So I don't know how well that's going to work on the painting. I personally much prefer a color palette you're given in like a traditional watercolor set with, the traditional kind of colors. But I do definitely think this is an improvement from the typical Artist Loft watercolors you get. I'll bring over the swatch sheet from that set I showed you earlier, and definitely some of the colors, they're very similar. I don't know how well it'll pick up on camera, but to me, like I said, these, it's like they almost have a chalky haze over them, like the chalkiness you could feel from them. While these are definitely brighter, and as you could probably see during the swatch, it was really nice activating them. They got very creamy, like watercolors usually should, which again doesn't usually happen with the chalkier ones. So they're pretty nice. Definitely not, to me, still not on the level of like, you know, a student grade like the Winsor & Newton Cotmans or anything. But for a $10 kit, they're pretty decent. And I will say too, I like this brush so far. As you can see, it's been holding its shape, so that's good. But now I'll move on to actually painting one of them and see how all the supplies hold up.
So for choosing my design, I went with the octopus simply just because it was my least favorite of all the choices, and I figured if the paints were to behave extremely horribly, at least I would have my favorite design still to paint with my own watercolors. But I will say that was wrong of me to think that, because I am very, very happy with how this octopus turned out. I think it is really, really cute and just as good as all the other designs. So I am very sorry to the octopus for assuming it would be horrible. But anyways, to go into how this kit performed, I will start off with the cons, and they kind of are as expected. If you want to create a tightly rendered, piece, this is not the art kit for you. As expected, the wood pulp paper, not great. Basically, cotton paper usually gives you a little bit more time to work with the watercolors, so you can create really nice smooth blendings, and the colors just naturally kind of blend into each other really nicely. On this paper, you'll notice that you put down paint and it either kind of just lays on top in a giant watery blob, or if you lay it down with a lot less water, it basically dries immediately, giving you no time to work with it, which for this octopus was kind of difficult because, again, it's a very large amount of space. So like for the legs, for example, I could not get down a flat color on the leg because it was too long and parts of it would be drying right away. The other thing I noticed that was really weird was how easy it was for the paints to take in other colors off the paper already. Usually with watercolor, you have this thing called glazing, where you can layer watercolor over another dried layer of watercolor, and it kind of has a transparency effect. For this, basically, if I had a light color and I even touched a color that was already dried on the paper, it would immediately suck in all that color. And you'll notice it in particular when I was doing the underside of the legs in light purple. I'd accidentally touch that orange, which was dry, and it would just like suck it all up, which was kind of weird. So those were the two main problems I had. As far as materials, the brush was also a little problematic in that it didn't really seem to absorb the water very well. I would always kind of have like a giant blob of water coming off the brush, so that was also something I had to get used to. Now to go on to the pros. So my con before with, the paper obviously having a lot of like weird effects, I think can also kind of be a pro in this situation. Obviously, all these designs are kind of ocean sea creatures, so if you have that kind of bloom or water edge effect that you're getting here, it's actually quite nice for this because it does give a water effect. Now again, if you are going into this project saying, I want to create a very realistic octopus, that's not going to be a good thing for you. But I think if you want to go in and just create a fun painting that has a kind of watercolory look, the effect you're going to get with these paints is actually going to work in your favor. And I was very happy in the end, honestly, even though it's not, beautifully blended together. It looks like a watercolor piece, and it makes you feel like you're in the ocean because of the water effects. So I think that's very nice. The second thing that I will really give kudos to this kit for is exactly how vibrant the colors are. I have seen a lot of people use Artist Loft paints, both the pans and the tubes, on, cheap wood pulp paper like this, and it usually does not turn out this bright. It usually turns out very, very light. So these paints are definitely a step up from the normal Artist Color Loft paints. I mean, it looks so vibrant. Even in real life, it looks phenomenally good, I think. So I think that's another plus to it. So I would say that this kit is definitely worth it just for $5 to $10. I think instead of, expecting to come in doing a, very detailed technical rendered piece, you should actually go in just hoping to have fun with the craft. If you want to just have a kit that's going to help you have fun with watercolor and create a very kind of loose style, I think this is absolutely perfect, and I definitely really enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to doing the rest. And I will definitely just use the paints they give me because I think they are definitely good enough for something like this.